AO fighting over inheritance with family. A lengthy post is on the way, so I will include a summary. My mother and uncle have passed away, leaving behind an inheritance that is to be divided between me, 22F, and my 3 cousins. While the initial plan seemed fair, complications arose. I temporarily resided in my grandfather's apartment, and my cousins accused me of stealing money that was never there. One cousin, in fact, took money I found while cleaning and never returned it. They subsequently blocked me from returning to the apartment when I had nowhere else to go. Now, they wish to sell half of the house without providing me with anything, even though they require my consent. I have no interest in the money, but I refuse to be manipulated any longer. Hello, everyone. As I mentioned, this is going to be a lengthy post, but I will try to keep it as brief as possible. Before I continue, I should note that I am not from the United States, so inheritance laws in my country may differ, and I am unsure how they work. Essentially, if I owned a house and had 2 children, and I were to pass away without a will, that house would be divided equally between my children. If one child has 1 offspring and the other has 2, when my children pass away, the first child would inherit 50 of the house, while the other 2 would receive 25 each. This is essentially what is unfolding in my family right now. My mother, 22F, and my uncle have passed away, along with my grandparents. My uncle had 3 children, whereas my mother had only me, meaning I receive half of my grandparents' inheritance, which includes a house, an apartment, and some land in a village that I know little about. To make it easier to understand, I will refer to my cousins as Jack, 30M, Will, 20M, and Robert, 18M. Everything seemed fine at first. My mother had informed me that the agreement to prevent disputes over the inheritance was for me to receive the apartment, my 2 cousins to receive the house, and the third to receive the land in the village. I was completely agreeable to this arrangement since I wanted to avoid conflicts over the inheritance, although I thought it would never happen. How wrong I was. When my grandfather passed away, there was no one to care for his dog. I adore dogs and shared many memories with her. I loved her as if she were my own at the time I had another dog, and my mother also cared for her deeply. As my parents had their own dog, I could not bring the dog in, so I chose to move into his apartment with both dogs. I consulted my cousins, and they all said it was acceptable. Although the apartment was dilapidated and infested with cockroaches, I did not mind. My primary concern was ensuring the dog could live out her remaining years in comfort. She is currently 12 years old, although she does not act any different than she did as a puppy, so I am skeptical about those being her final years. But that is a different tale altogether. My parents, for clarification, when I mention my parents, I refer to my father and my stepmother. Noticing the poor condition of my grandfather's apartment allowed me to move into one of my father's apartments. I recognize we own multiple apartments, but as mentioned, this is not the United States, and apartment ownership is much more common in my country. My cousins contacted me to inform me that we needed to gather to receive my grandfather's money. They believed he was wealthy and had a significant amount in his bank account. However, we only received his pension money, which was around €700. I was indifferent, but they were enraged, convinced that he had hidden money in his apartment. They then called me to join them in searching for the supposed millions of dollars he had concealed. Everything was still fine among us at that point. Then they began asking me some strange questions. Have you taken any money while living here? You know he had a lot of money, and if we don't find anything, we may have to hire a detective to investigate. You lived here, so you're the most suspicious. Such inquiries confused and saddened me. I began to doubt myself. Had I taken any money? Had I accidentally thrown it out while cleaning? Since the place was not in optimal condition, I did quite a bit of cleaning during my stay. I will step back briefly to recount a time when I found some money, €200 while cleaning. I immediately called my cousins, informed them about the money, and explained that I would be using it to clean and perhaps purchase something to combat the roaches. I also told them where I was placing it on a shelf in my grandfather's room, in the box I had discovered it. One day while we were cleaning, I noticed the box from where the money had been on the desk. I opened it, and to my surprise, it was empty. I turned to them and said, Guys, I think someone, and I truly meant a burglar, has been here. The money is gone. The best way I can describe their expressions was akin to how my dogs look when they have made a mess in my room. Very guilty. I took it, Will admitted. I needed some money quickly and I knew it was here. I'm sorry. He tried to call you, but you didn't answer your phone, Robert added. I'll return it as soon as I can, Will promised. I asked when he had taken it and checked for a missed call, but there was none. I inquired why he hadn't sent me a message, and once again he excused himself, insisting he tried calling but assured me he would pay it back. I said it was fine. That was 2 years ago, and I still have not received anything. At this point, I do not care about the money. I am concerned about the principle of the matter. I would have willingly given it to him if he had asked. I had also offered assistance multiple times, but he never accepted. I would not have asked for the money to be returned. However, can we not call this stealing? Furthermore, even if he did try calling and I missed it, which I am convinced did not happen, he could have left me a message. We are friends on social media, follow each other on various platforms, and have multiple means of communication. A simple message would have sufficed. Another incident occurred during a disagreement with my parents, during which they stated they would evict me from the apartment where my father had allowed me to stay. I had no other place to go and expressed that I would need to return to my grandfather's apartment. That won't be possible. We are still searching for the money, Will said when I told him I would have to move back in. But I have nowhere else to go. Tell your parents you cannot return to that apartment. You will need to find alternative accommodation. Fortunately, my parents and I reconciled, and they forgave me, allowing me to remain in the apartment. But what if they hadn't? I truly had no other options. They have deceitfully claimed that each of us will receive 25 of the inheritance, despite my knowing that this is not accurate. I am certain they are aware of this as well, especially Will, who is not only the eldest but also works in the government, making him familiar with these matters. I was deeply hurt. I thought we loved and cared for one another. My mother passed away first in 2017, and they had always been kind to me, encouraging me to reach out if I needed help or offering to assist me with various matters. For a long time, especially since my grandfather's death, I convinced myself that perhaps they had good intentions, that maybe I did not comprehend the full situation. It makes me question whether their kindness was solely because I was the only person inheriting my mother's belongings. Now they wish to sell half of the house without providing me with any money, asserting that it is supposed to be our share of the inheritance. Of course, they added that if I ever rented out the apartment or sold it, all the proceeds would go to me, as it allegedly constitutes my share of the inheritance. However, I no longer trust their word. They require my consent to sell that portion. As I mentioned, I own half of the house, and I do not intend to grant it. To be honest, it is not about the money for me. I am indifferent to that. If they had treated me fairly, if they had allowed me to utilize the apartment that was supposedly my share of the inheritance, if they had not lied or deceived me, I would have willingly relinquished my part of the house. I would not have given it a second thought. I understand they have faced financial difficulties since my uncle's passing, if not before. However, I do not view financial hardship as a justification for damaging family relationships. I do not believe that money is the root of all evil. Instead, I consider it a reflection of a person's true character. To be honest, plotting to turn against them feels quite malicious to me, and I struggle with the feelings it evokes within me. Nonetheless, I cannot seem to care less. Story 2. My mill, 52F, can't handle any boundaries my DH, 23M, and I, 21F, set. Primarily, I am writing to express my frustrations. Partially, I am seeking guidance. I, 21 female, am married to J, 23 male. We have been married for a year now and dated for a year prior to that. We met in college, and our marriage has generally been wonderful, except for his mother. We'll refer to her as Jackie. For context, she is technically his stepmother, as Jaitik's biological mother passed away when he was a toddler. When I first met Jackie a few years ago, she was incredibly warm, humorous, and someone I felt I could trust and confide in. I truly believed my husband's family was the family I had always envisioned. It is large, with many siblings and in-laws who loved and cherished me just as much as I loved and cherished them. That all changed 2 months before our wedding, when the red flags started to appear. Incident 1: moving. My in-laws have a rule that once you get married, All your belongings must leave with you. Fortunately, we had the space for our things at our residence. Everything was fine until the morning they were supposed to help us move. My in-laws never provided us with an estimated time of arrival, as they were staying with friends 45 minutes away, and we had woken up late that morning. My husband wanted to take me and his younger sister out for breakfast, and when my mother-in-law called and discovered this, she began yelling at him over the phone. She insisted that they were helping us and that we needed to be present because our absence would severely disrupt their plans. Let me remind you, they had never even informed us when to expect them. When they arrived at the house, she asked why we hadn't gotten breakfast, and my husband responded with a bit of attitude. My in-laws then took him outside and engaged in a shouting match while I called my parents so I wouldn't have to go outside and tell them to leave. The following day, my mother-in-law again berated my husband, lecturing him about how he was jeopardizing my relationship with them. If anyone can make sense of that, I would love to understand. Anyway, we ended up having the absolute worst New Year's celebration ever, where we all sat awkwardly at a table, had dinner, and hardly spoke. Incident 2: the silent treatment. Because my husband and I struggle with saying no, we spent all our savings on holiday gifts trying to visit everyone. We traveled from one end of the state to the other 11 times and returned home broke. We had to utilize gift money to attend our own wedding. As any reasonable couple would do, we sat down to discuss how we could handle the holidays differently. After months of conversation and debate, we eventually agreed to alternate holidays. Since my parents live closer, the money we save when visiting them one year would cover the 4-hour drive to his parents the following year, with the exception of Christmas. We spent that with his parents because my husband wanted to, and it's not as significant for my family. When his parents inquired about Mother's Day, my husband explained our plan. My mother-in-law was not pleased. For the next couple of months, every phone call with her ended in an argument about how we should manage the holidays. On one particular call, I spoke up and shared the same points my husband had previously made. It is a considerable financial burden to travel 4 hours once a month. We went completely broke last holiday season due to this and had to use gift money for our own wedding. This was a difficult decision, and we spent months deliberating it. This is how we intend to celebrate the holidays, and it is up to us to decide if and when it will change. After I said this, she hung up, and when we visited next, she completely ignored me. She transformed from a warm, loving woman to someone entirely unpleasant. I was heartbroken. My husband called them once we returned home and warned them that if they ever treated me like that again, we would cease visiting them. We attempted to sit down for a mature conversation, Jackie's words, not mine, but it went nowhere. She told him, and I quote, "I am not a warm and affectionate person, and I do not understand where you get this misconception about me." Then, after that, they took my husband aside and claimed he attacked them when he called to say they must treat me with respect. I told her we would never visit again. I never said that. I never would, and my husband knows this. He needs to apologize to them for his behavior. He never did, but his family never engaged in meaningful discussions anyway. Incident 3: Christmas. After all this, we all merely tolerate one another. My sister-in-law and her family are unwell, but my mother-in-law continues to argue with her and insists they must attend Christmas, even though the child and the father are feverish. Ultimately, my sister-in-law concedes. When we arrive for Christmas, do you know what we do? Absolutely nothing. None of us want to interact, so we all sit on our phones. My husband and I spent a significant amount of time curating a self-care gift for her since she enjoys such things, and all she did was pull out a face mask and remark, "You really want to cover up my face, don't you?" Then, before my husband and I embarked on the 4-hour drive to my parents' house, my mother-in-law gave me a hug and said, quite literally, "Wasn't it so lovely to come to our house and be spoiled for Christmas?" Actually, Jackie, no. It was dreadful, monotonous, and did not feel like Christmas whatsoever. Take your gifts back. Incident 4: Accountability. No, when my husband and I got married, my in-laws removed him from their phone plan. My parents offered to add my husband to theirs to help mitigate costs, because we are struggling financially and attempting to avoid debt. But my husband informed my mother-in-law of this, and she began accusing my mother of being financially and emotionally abusive, which she is not. She grew up with nothing and loves to assist her children so they do not have to face the same hardships she and my father did know. Strings attached, nothing. My parents are genuinely good people. Also, my mother-in-law met my mother once. In any case, when we got on our own plan, my husband needed his mother to assist with a Verizon issue to transfer it over, and she told him, "By the way, your phone is completely paid off. You're welcome." Imagine that in the most sarcastic tone. However, she had not paid off the phone, and that's acceptable. We intended to pay it off ourselves. Unfortunately, my husband had an accident that damaged his car, and simultaneously, his phone stopped functioning within a span of 2 months. Therefore, finances were extremely tight. Our only option was to pay off my husband's phone and acquire a new one. I somewhat overstepped by suggesting my husband call his mother from my phone and request that she honor her word by paying off the phone. He bravely did so, with kindness and gentleness, and I assure you, I could hear her yelling at him, undeniably screaming, over the phone from across the house, despite my phone having 2 broken speakers and not being at full volume. Eventually, she paid it off, but now my husband is utterly heartbroken. She acted passive-aggressively and ungraciously, employing dirty tactics by calling him a terrible son and hurling all sorts of insults. On the positive side, he has begun to recognize this behavior pattern from his entire life and realizes it is unacceptable. We are attending couples counseling, and the therapist has stated that while he cannot definitively diagnose her, he strongly suspects she exhibits narcissistic traits and has provided us with several tools. We have a session scheduled for April, so that should be interesting. Unfortunately, my husband is struggling, and it is disheartening. He feels incredibly isolated from his family and believes his entire life has been a facade. Fortunately, his grandmother, who is his father's stepmother, is close by, and we visit her frequently. She adores my husband. She was there when he was born. Story 3. How my friend got paid to find creative ways to sleep for 19 months. I shared this as a comment in another subreddit, and someone direct messaged me, mentioning that you all might be interested in the story. I hope it fits well here. A brief summary is provided at the end. I have a close friend who cleverly navigated her way into being compensated for essentially accomplishing nothing for 19 months. It was a government job, which is not surprising. She and her coworker were employed at a state office responsible for monitoring plague cases among prairie dog communities. They were extremely busy trapping and testing throughout the summer, but once winter arrived, the prairie dogs hibernated, leaving them without work. They informed their supervisor via email that there was no more work for the season in that first autumn, and their supervisor replied by instructing them to remain available for reassignment. So they complied. For months, they were reluctant to be accused of theft by merely clocking in and out and leaving, so initially they organized some storage areas, albeit very slowly, cleaned their office multiple times, arranged paperwork, and engaged in similar tasks. When they exhausted their legitimate tasks, they resorted to napping, completing school assignments, doing Sudoku, and similar activities. At first, they took turns sleeping to ensure someone was always available in case anyone checked on them, but when they realized that no one was coming, they stopped the pretense. By the summer of the following year, when the prairie dogs emerged from hibernation, and she anticipated her work might resume, the entire office, all employees across every department, received an email from an upper management official informing them that the specific department had been eliminated. I don't know whether it was due to a lack of funding, if they had gathered all the necessary data the previous summer, or if that particular pet project of some politician had been forgotten, but somehow, the State Fish and Game Department ended the project for reasons unknown. The email made no mention of her job status, so she and her coworker continued to go in and do nothing. She shared stories about making a large binder rubber band chain, tying together 2 office chairs facing each other to sleep in the seats. She is only 5 feet tall, so she fit reasonably well, creating a nest under her desk and moving the bulky copy machine out of its cabinet to sleep inside. They ensured that the security personnel saw them occasionally throughout the day, and they were on camera. Anyone in a higher position observing would have noticed, but no one ever took the time to do so. They avoided interacting with individuals in other departments for fear of being reported and simply kept to themselves. They rarely had much interaction with other employees anyway. Eventually, she encountered her boss at an event, and the boss asked my friend where she had found new employment. My friend did not lie and replied that she still worked there. The boss inquired, "Where?" To which my friend responded, "Where you left them." You should have seen her face when the supervisor connected the dots and realized what was happening. The game was up, and she along with her coworker was terminated the following morning via email before they arrived at the office. Because they had technically been employed there for so long, I believe 2 years is the threshold. They both received a small severance package. In case you are curious, they were allowed to retain their pay because 1. They had evidence that they informed their supervisor they had no work, and she clearly acknowledged the email and replied. 2. They continued showing up. 3. They did exactly what they were instructed. And 4. It was not their responsibility to ensure they had tasks to complete. They both qualified for unemployment benefits as well. Neither of them applied for unemployment because both anticipated that the situation could change at any moment, so they had new jobs lined up. Edited to add, "Thank you all for sharing your stories. I had no idea that it was so common for employees to be misplaced while still receiving pay. You are all broadening my perspective. Please keep sharing." The quote from Independence Day comes to mind as I read your comments. You didn't think they actually spent $10,000 for a hammer, $30,000 for a toilet seat, did you? It is not Area 51 where all that money is going. It is to forgotten and obsolete government employees. Edit update. I received permission from my friend to share her story, and she asked me to include some additional activities they engaged in while waiting. She does not use Reddit. One autumn, she and her coworker decorated their shared napping hiding spot a walk-in storage closet with tiny Halloween decorations and then reenacted scenes from Hocus Pocus. She dedicated a lot of time to editing Wikipedia entries for grammar. She learned to knit, but soon discovered that she does not enjoy it. Her coworker downloaded plans from the internet to construct a personal flying device, think jetpack, and attempted to create it using office supplies at a scale of 1/16. They understood it would not fly. They merely wanted to see if they could build a model of what it would look like. During Christmas, they created all new jingles about their boredom. They completed 14 songs in total and recorded them on a small tape recorder she still possesses. Her colleague attended evening classes and completed his homework during the day. By the time they were finally let go, he was very close to becoming a paralegal. He completed his education and quickly found a job, and all these years later, he is now a real estate attorney. Good for him. They conceived the idea for Uber and Lyft, developing a solid plan for a non-taxi ride service based on ordering a car online. This was before smartphones. She corresponded with several imprisoned serial killers and expressed her disappointment in them. However, she never received a response. Thank you once more for sharing your stories. You are all remarkable individuals, and I hope you have a great day. Edit. A few people direct messaged me asking what she is doing now. She received a glowing reference from her state job and subsequently worked at our city zoo before obtaining her certification in wildlife rehabilitation. She currently serves as a public outreach coordinator for a big cat sanctuary. No, she does not miss her former job of managing plague-ridden prairie dogs or enduring extreme boredom. She sends her thanks for your interest. Summary. My friend's job became unnecessary. When she notified her supervisor that she and her coworker had no more work, she was told to wait for reassignment. My friend waited for 19 months while being compensated for doing nothing until she bumped into her boss at an event, leading her boss to eventually recognize what was happening. My friend and her coworker were quietly dismissed, receiving a small severance package,